Hello and welcome to my lecture today on how children learn to talk. If you've ever tried to learn a new language, you know that it's not easy. There are new rules of grammar with many exceptions, new sounds that are difficult to make, and there are endless lists of vocabulary to commit to your memory. And yet you managed to learn the basics of your first language by the time you were 2 years old, and all without a textbook to help you. Not only are children able to absorb the complicated rules of grammar without any formal teaching, they often do so from a very limited vocabulary. Regardless of how much they're spoken to, a child will not hear every sentence and word by the time they start to speak. Yet when they do start talking, children apply the grammatical rules in new ways to create new phrases that they've never heard before. This level of information processing would be incredible in anyone, let alone someone just mastering walking. Child language acquisition brings together the disciplines of linguistics, psychology, and neuroscience. The result is a lot of different theories based on different aspects of child language acquisition. So we know quite a lot, but we don't know everything, and there are lots of questions still to be answered. What follows is a series of things that we might expect a child to do in their language acquisition from the ages of 0 through to 4. The first year involves lots of playing with sounds. You might hear mama and dada, but you'll also hear baba and gaga as babies are reduplicating the sounds they can make. That means repeating. They make the sounds that are easiest to say first, and the plosive d is much easier than the lip manipulating m, so it's all about ease, not parental preference. Babbling comes next as babies make words resembling sounds with pauses and expression. Babbling sounds the same in any language. Babies enjoy some sounds more than others, relishing the feel of them in their mouths. They practice the sounds that they can make and that they'll need for their language, and they begin to filter out the sounds not needed for their first language by the end of this year. Babies show signs of comprehension from as young as 2 months, responding to the tone of voice of the people around them. Between 6 and 9 months, they understand simple utterances like clap hands and bye-bye, as well as simple instructions like pass me teddy. They continue to learn the nuances of turn-taking, expression and other conversation features as they listen to those people around them, becoming quite adept. Watch the father and baby in this video conversing. It shows just how much of an expert the baby is at conversation without it uttering a single recognisable word.
Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Huh? Oh no, not this one. This is the grand finale of it. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right, don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't break it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. And then it was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? But don't do that here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy. Right.
Individual words will start to emerge in what's known as the holophrastic stage. The words are generally nouns first, and they're words that are important to the child's world. So it might be milk, bottle, cat, mum. Approximately 60% of the words have a naming function. So the ones I've just mentioned, cat and milk. But another 20% of them will express action. So sleep, talk. Vocabularies will develop relatively quickly, from 0 words to 20 in the first 6 months of speaking. This is what's known as a child's expressive language, the words that they can actually speak or communicate or utter. The pronunciation of the words may not be quite like adults yet, but with modelling and with repetition from parents, this will improve as the child gets older. Children will recognise the names of familiar people, body parts, objects around them. They'll be able to point to things if you ask them to. All of this is receptive language, and it's much greater than the language that they can produce. If you think about it, it's the same for adults. We know many more words than we actually use on a day-to-day basis. At the holophrastic stage, a child uses an individual word to suggest a whole sentence or a whole idea. Parents have to play a bit of a guessing game to work out what cat means. Do they want the cat to come forward? Have they seen a cat? Is the cat on the table eating something it shouldn't be? We have to work it out. And children will tell us when we get it wrong. So they do have a really good grasp of grammar. If we don't interpret as they intend, they will make it very clear. During this period, a child's vocabulary is increasing by the day. They can add 5, 10, 15 words per day in some cases. During this time, children move from the holophrastic stage to the two-word stage, where two words help to convey a simple grammatical sentence, extending their knowledge of language and communication a little bit further. At the two-word stage, children are putting together nouns and verbs, but they're interesting in the way that they can use their nouns in both the subject and the object position, and they do this grammatically correctly. When a child says shut door, it means, possibly, can you shut the door? I will shut the door. Can you shut the door? But whatever, the word order is absolutely correct. The two-word stage might also combine prepositions with nouns, such as in car, on bed. So if Daddy is in the car, we might just get in car. If the cat is on the bed, we might just get on bed. But again, you can see that the prepositions are in the correct order. It is at this stage that children will start to use their intonation to good effect. So although they may not have all the words that they need to make questions, they do use the tone of voice in their two-word utterances to make it clear to us it's a question. So Daddy gone is obviously a rising intonation at the end to ask, has Daddy gone, or where has Daddy gone? So it's interesting to see how this question form is developing as well. And their receptive language is also getting bigger and bigger. So they can act on a two-step request from an adult around them, such as sit down and look at your book, or go over there and get something, showing that they can actually keep in their head and remember two stages of communication from an adult. Between 2 and 3 years of age, a child could have as many as 300 words, and they're adding again daily as they reach new pieces of information around them. Nouns and verbs and pronouns are now all added together to make shorter sentences, such as you kick the ball, I drink milk, I go bed, etc., etc. These are obviously becoming closer to the sentences that you and I might make, and with parents or caregivers giving their feedback in corrections or in repetition, children learn when they can to put the grammar together and make it into more recognisably adult sentences. One of the most interesting things about this stage is the way that we can see how grammar is learned without the use of any kind of formal teaching. When children first learn to talk, they often make verbs, and they make them in the present tense, but then they often make them in the past tense. What's really interesting is that initially they can make the irregular verbs into past tense absolutely correctly. So, I ran. But then they go to a period where they have learned some of the rules, or they seem to know that they've learned some of the rules of how to make past tense. So we know that we make past tense on regular verbs by adding an ed. But of course, for irregular verbs, that's not correct. You can't say I runned, but children do. And they're the same children that earlier said I ran. It appears as though these children are basically learning the rules as they go along. They pick up the right way of doing it. They learn a rule and then they apply the rule, but they apply the rule to everything. And then they realise that they're getting it wrong in some cases. And then they'll eventually come back to using the correct form of the irregular past tense ending for the ones that they need to, for the irregular verbs, and not for the regular verbs. So they will have gone through a whole process which nobody's taught them, but that they've worked out from what they've had happen when they've spoken. So that's one of the really interesting things. By the time a child is 3, it's gone through the telegraphic stage. It's moved from 3 words, perhaps into 4 words, and we've got really clear examples of adding elements of clause structure. So Daddy got car to Daddy got new car begins to show us that the child is adding extra elements of the clauses to make it clearer. You go bed now, whoever that child is talking to, is showing you an element of time. Where Daddy put car, it's a question. We've begun to get some question words in there. So we can see that the telegraphic stage helps the child to resemble more adult sentence construction. Between 3 and 4 years of age, children's vocabularies have exploded even more. They may know as many as 1,000 words. They start to talk in much more complex sentences and use grammar which more directly replicates adult grammar. Their sentences become much longer as they string clauses together to express more and more complex thoughts and ideas. And they begin to tell stories, although they may be quite dull as far as some adults are concerned, using and as a very obvious linking word. But they then develop because and so and then. They may not be the most exciting stories in the world, but they are telling you, they're communicating with you something about their world. Some of the more complex sounds of our language will still cause some difficulties for children. R's and Z's and F's and the th sound are all quite difficult. R quite often becomes a W sound. It's to do with the way the mouth is forming words. Most children will have these sounds right by the time they're 5 or 6. Some might take until they're 9 or 10 to get them right, but generally by 6 most children have got these right. And they'll speak in ways that adults understand without too much difficulty at all. Children of this age enjoy stories and they love jokes and they love to ask questions about the world around them. They should be able to say how old they are, and they will tell stories to anybody who will listen to them. Child language acquisition is a huge area of research with many varied theories about how children learn language and why they learn it, partly because it spans the disciplines of linguistics and psychology and neuroscience. There doesn't seem to be a single theory that supports everything that a child does when it's learning how to talk. There are gaps that aren't explained through each of the individual theories. On the slide, there are a list of theories which don't go into very much detail, but give you a sense of what is going on in each of those theories. So in nativist theory, Noam Chomsky believed that the ability to learn language was an innate part of humans, and that we have something that he calls a language acquisition device within our brain somewhere, which is tuned in to learning the language that we hear around us. It also assumes a universal grammar, that all children learn language in roughly the same kind of way, no matter which language it is that they're trying to learn. Whereas B.F. Skinner, a behaviourist, saw children as blank slates who were influenced by the world around them and built their language through imitation and learning from that environment. Cognitive theory, put forward through Piaget and Lev Vygotsky, assumes that children can only learn language when they understand concepts. So you can't talk about tomorrow until you understand the concept of time in that way. For those of you who have children, you may be able to remember when your children couldn't remember some of the family members. It takes children quite a long time to get to grips with the different family members and the relationships between them. So that would be an example that would perhaps support the cognition theory. However, again, that one doesn't explain everything. Two more modern theories are the learning theory and the interactionist theory. The learning theory is that children basically learn language much like they learn anything else. It's all about working out the various stages, putting things together and then practicing. So repetition. Now, again, this may help, but it doesn't show us how a child makes a sentence they've never heard before, for instance. In terms of interactionist theory, children learn language because they want to communicate with the world around them. Well, that's fine, but how do they work out how to do that? So there's an awful lot more for us to discover here. So my conclusion today is that we still don't have all of the answers. There's lots of information on this slide, but it's basically all saying that theorists are still working on what child language acquisition is all about. So if you've been interested by what we've spoken about today, or what I've spoken about today, know that you can follow this down the road of A-levels and degree courses. If you are interested in child language, you could be doing A-levels in English language, which has a child language acquisition unit. You could do psychology, which also looks at child development and language development. If you're more interested in the science of the brain, obviously biology would be the way to go. And these could lead you to university courses in speech therapy or linguistics or child psychology, and obviously neuroscience again. If a degree isn't the route you want to go, but you're interested, then anything to do with children in terms of employment, careers in nursery nursing, in teaching, will possibly have elements of this kind of thing within it. So I hope you've enjoyed today's lecture. I've enjoyed sharing with you some of the things that I know about this, and yeah, thank you for tuning in.